Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview. A first look then at what is on the front pages. Coming up, we'll see what's making the headlines with The Sun's political editor, Harry Cole, and the editor of Nottinghamshire Live, Natalie Fahy. They'll be with us right through until midnight. So let's see, first of all, what is on the front pages. The Metro offers free cheers to the news that nightclubs are reopening, but also looks at the ramifications of vaccine passports launching in the autumn. According to the Daily Telegraph, the government hopes the launch of the passport scheme will encourage young people to get a vaccine. That also makes the front page of The Times. No jab means no entry, the headline. The Daily Mail asks whether the passports are the price of freedom. Amid worries too many people are being pinged by the NHS app, the Financial Times carries Boris Johnson's announcement that key workers will soon be exempt from self-isolation rules. The Star suggests that the pinging problem and the government running out of lateral flow test kits on the first day out of lockdown amounts to carry-on chaos. Meanwhile, The Guardian reports on concerns that governments could be using spyware to survey political opponents and journalists after just such an accusation was made against India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And The Sun has word of Prince Harry's announcement that he is writing a memoir. So let's talk more with Harry and Natalie on what was Freedom Day, but is now, if you look at the newspapers, new restrictions coming in. Natalie, should we be confused by this, or should we simply see it as a way to encourage young people to get jabbed?
Well, I think confusion is one way to put it, but probably most people will be absolutely horrified at the chaos that's going on. No one knows which way to turn. It was supposed to be Freedom Day, but then, a few hours after this was announced and all those joyful photos you've seen of people in nightclubs, the Prime Minister comes out and says, no, actually, we are going to do vaccine passports, despite so many times over and over and over saying, no, of course not. This is Great Britain. We're not a carrying papers on you kind of country. And suddenly we need vaccine passports. I just don't think it's going to encourage young people to get the vaccine. In fact, I think it could push nightclubbing underground and we could return to sort of 90s illegal rave kind of scene, because I just don't think this is the right way to encourage the young people to get jabs.
Yeah, interesting. The Daily Mail leading on this, so too the Telegraph, so too the Times. Is it fair to say it's left people slightly horrified, Harry?
I think a small subsection of people, a very vocal subsection of people, were very angry about this. So they've been very angry about lots of things, very angry about lockdown. I think most people will sort of shrug a little bit, actually, and think, well, I've had both my jabs by then. This isn't coming in. This isn't discriminating against like the travel plans are in a way, which means that under 30s can't actually really go on a holiday to ambulance countries this summer. Because without isolating, that is very discriminatory. I think most people will just sort of look at this and think, well, let's see what happens in September when we get there. This is so far away in the grand scale of sort of pandemic U-turns and ups and downs and twists and plots that, frankly, let's believe it when we see it. I think what the government are doing is they're looking at France very closely, where President Macron announced that certain things, so you'll need a double jab vaccine passport to get into certain things. And they had a million people sign up overnight for a jab. However, then they went a bit too far on that. Then they looked at that result and then thought, well, let's do it a bit further, and started throwing in restaurants and bars and all sorts of things. And people have ended up on the streets. So there's a bit of there's a fine balance to be done here. But evidence from Israel does suggest that there is a certain incentive-led vaccine lure that you can get young people to do it. But what I would just say is I'm not quite sure we really have, there are 3 million under 30s who haven't yet been jabbed. If we go back to sort of January, February, I imagine there was quite a similar number of people who'd been offered the jab at that time who hadn't yet had it. Under 30s haven't really had that much of an opportunity to get the jab yet. So I do think maybe it's a little bit of a rush to judgment.
Yes, that's true. Give them some time. Certainly, as you say, many not had the chance to get a second jab. And France has massively rode back already, hasn't it, on some of its restrictions, reducing its fines by a huge margin today after that reaction that you talked about. What will the reaction be to the idea of these vaccine passports coming in? We'll have to wait and see. Your question, I guess, Harry, you put, is it going to be a passport for a pint? So, you know, what is the difference, Natalie, between going to a nightclub and a crowded bar where you're allowed to actually go to the bar now? You know, will it be a drip drip? I mean, we've seen it across Europe, this idea. Will it come in, do you think, come the autumn?
Well, I mean, as Harry said, you know, so many things have changed. We'll just have to wait and see till September. And you quite rightly referenced what happened in Israel. And unfortunately, it wasn't really adhered to by the you know, the pubs and the cafes and the nightclubs that were supposed to be enforcing the rules. And so eventually it was dropped after around 3 months. And I think that is something the government needs to think about, is what are the nightclubs and those kind of institutions going to think of all the extra red tape that's now being put on them? I know, you know, as an editor of a regional paper myself, we'll be going straight to some of those nightclubs and night economy workers tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon when they're up to say, well, what does this mean for you? How are you going to be able to enforce it? What's all the bureaucracy mean? Do you think you're going to have extra door staff, extra door security to enforce it, to tell a fake one from a real one? I mean, there's all kinds of unanswered questions. We're in July. It's supposed to be happening in September.
Yeah, well, the FT, if we look at that, says the decision to open nightclubs has made Johnson's advisors nervous. Right the way across the world, we've seen that nightclubs and events where lots of people gather indoors are a potential for super-spreading events. This was Patrick Vallens, the chief scientific advisor. And certainly they're suggesting that it's an attempt to pressurise some 3 million, as you pointed out, Harry, or 35% of 18 to 30-year-olds who've not received a vaccination to do so. People like David Davis criticising, saying it amounts to coercing people into getting vaccinated. But their main story is about key sector workers being exempt from isolation rules. Do we have any detail about when this might come in? Because the list is quite long, isn't it? Food, water, electricity, medicines, the running of our trains, the protection of our borders and the defence of the realm.
Yes, we had a bit of fun with this earlier in the day when, dare I suggest, this was a policy made up on the hoof. But it took a little while to get some level of detail. We haven't actually yet got a definitive list of who's going to be exempt, because obviously the great pingdemic, let freedom ping, as I think my favourite headline of the day was, you know, it is blighting, you know, various sectors, not least the NHS, not least critical for supply. But there comes a point in, you know, how many people do you exempt from this before you make the entire policy pointless? Obviously, we learned at the weekend that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor believe that they should be exempt from it. But then, you know, how far down that list of critical infrastructure do you go? If you're saying that the truckers and the meat producers and the factories that are producing food are critical infrastructure, what about the people that are stacking the shelves and manning the tills? It's, you know, it comes a point where you have to draw quite a firm line, which the government tried to do today. The Prime Minister tried to do a little bit and say, look, actually, we're not going to relax the app. That would be pointless. We're not going to relax the pandemic. That would be pointless. But, you know, where do you draw the line with this? And I think once you start having some key sectors allowed to be exempt and others not, I think it just adds to this idea that people are going to start ignoring these orders. And you know, we've already seen millions delete the app in their droves. And the problem with telling people to practice personal responsibility is often they will just take things into their own hands, and the results might not be the intended ones. Yeah, indeed so. And they see people in nightclubs, and they think, why am I isolating for 10 days for something I feel like I've probably not come into contact with somebody who's got COVID? You know, all of this starts to become a balance, doesn't it, for your own judgment? Meantime, The Star is focusing on the decisions being made by government, not least what happened on Saturday, obviously, with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, whether or not they decide to isolate because of coming into contact with the Health Secretary. Carry on chaos, 1.7 million pinged into isolation. Iceland and pubs shut in staff crisis. Government testing kits run out on day one. Number 10 snubs solution of U-turn, etc., etc. What message should the public get from all of this, Natalie?
Well, I mean, I think the Daily Star's hit the nail on the head there, really, as it quite often does with its splashes nowadays. I mean, they're quite funny, but there's a serious message underlying all of that. And obviously, we're all familiar with the Carry On films, so we get the joke. But it's absolutely spot on. It is chaotic, and I think because we've got no proper opposition at the moment. Where is Keir Starmer in all of this, and the Labour Party? What are they doing? How are they speaking up for the people who voted for them last time and the people who support them? And meanwhile, the government's just sort of running riot, U-turning at the slightest tweet of somebody who doesn't like what they're doing, and being mocked on the front of the Daily Star. So, yeah, I really like that front page. It just sums it all up perfectly, I think.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer certainly put out today how reckless he believes some of the decisions are. But does it matter? But go on.
He's not opposing them, though, is he? That's
No.
the thing. It's classic Starmer. He goes, "Oh, this is reckless," and then you ask him what he's opposing, and he says, "Oh, well, we should give people more money to self-isolate." Not, "Let's stop Freedom Day. Let's do that." He's like, "Well, I think we should go a little bit slower." It's ridiculous. It is opposition by paint by numbers, but it's just not there.
Yeah. So my question to you, Harry, is, should the government literally just let it rip? This idea that if you step in now, you are merely postponing inevitable cases is effectively the, if not now, then when moment. And instead, they've got a little bit nervous. And, it's either one thing or the other. What do you sense about what they're really trying to do here?
I think there is a really fine balance that needs to be sort of the tightrope they're walking, and I think Whitty is the one that sort of summed it up really well on the sort of if not now then when sort of line of saying, look, this is the middle of the summer. This is when the NHS is at its least pressure. We can't stay locked down forever. At some point, there has to be this sort of this balance made. And the problem is that actually, obviously, those case numbers are getting to, as I think he said, scary numbers. But it's a sort of hold your nerve, keep looking at those hospitalisation numbers. And we've talked about this many times, week after week, about that deal that was done to protect the NHS. It was to stop the NHS being overwhelmed. It was never to eradicate COVID. That is impossible. You're never going to get to the zero COVID, despite the slightly loony fringes of the left that want the country to. And it's where does the country sort of hold its nerve? What line do you get to? What is an acceptable amount of deaths every day? And I think we're about to find out where the public think that is.
OK, it's going to be interesting in the next few weeks. A lot of uncertainty, as we heard from that news conference today. Keep an eye on that, obviously. Lots more still to come there, including Harry has nabbed himself an exclusive, how the government plans to pay off its massive social care bill. It's that, Harry, but we'll also have Prince Harry news too. Back in a moment. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now, Harry Cole and Natalie Fahy. Welcome back to both of you. So we're going straight to your story in The Sun, Harry, and this is about national insurance contributions to fund social care. What are you saying?
Well, we asked the Prime Minister this afternoon, actually, about whether he was still committed to his 2019 manifesto promise not to raise national insurance or tax. And he very, very deftly avoided answering the question and said, "Oh, I know what you're on about. This is about social care, and we'll tell you all about that soon." And off he ran. So ministers have been locked in sort of quite tense negotiations the last few weeks about how to fill the social care black hole, which is, people have been for decades for a long-term funding solution for social care. Boris Johnson, when he arrived in Downing Street in 2019, said, "I've got a plan and we're going to announce it imminently." It's now 2 years. There's talk of him wanting to announce it on his anniversary, but of being Prime Minister, which is next weekend. But obviously he's now in isolation, which is sort of throwing that into chaos. But it looks like it's the meat of the issue, which is there's going to be tax rises. The Tories said they wouldn't touch national insurance, but the pandemic black hole has sort of blown all that out of the water. And it looks like they're zeroing in now on a compromise to not put up income tax, but to hammer a penny on, so 1% onto national insurance contributions. Now, there's going to be an almighty row about that because that hits the youngest hardest. And, they've already had a pretty tough pandemic to now make them pay for, a black hole that isn't necessarily their fault or indeed funding them yet is going to be a hard political sell.
And just quickly, who would pay that? Would it be employers or employees then?
As it stands, I think it is an employer's contribution. There may be an employee's contribution. It could be 1% from both of them, which would more than fill the black hole. Which others are speculating tonight that could also go towards paying down some of the waiting list costs and the sort of other wider funding holes in the NHS, which might make it a bit more of a palatable sell to MPs.
OK, watch this space, certainly. Meanwhile, Natalie, Prince Harry, Daily Telegraph, a memoir in the offing. The word from Prince Charles was that he is surprised, according to one newspaper.
Yes, I think Prince Charles is probably underplaying it there because, I've heard that there's a tsunami of fear washing through the royal family about what's going to come out in this book. And I suppose the other thing to think about is that Prince Harry said he wanted more of a private life. I feel his life has been anything but private since he's left the royal family. We've had Netflix documentaries. We've had, of course, the Oprah interview, which was a tell-all interview, and now a memoir, which has reportedly been paid a $20 million advance for. Absolutely huge. And, I do feel sorry for the Queen in all of this. And I think most people will do, actually, because she's had an awful year. She's had an absolutely terrible time. Her husband's died, obviously. It's horrific and terrible for her and all the rest of the royal family. And now this as well. I think Prince Harry should probably, give everyone a bit of a break in the royal family. It's not nice for them.
OK, Natalie, Harry, lovely to hear your thoughts for now.